Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I am once again joined by Mr. Editor-in-Chief Jak-Luke Sharp as we finally take a swing at classic Godzilla with a review for Godzilla vs. SpaceGodzilla. We have discussed the MonsterVerse, we've discussed some of the newer Japanese Godzilla films throughout those conversations, but finally we're gonna sit down and discuss classic Godzilla, filled with practical effects, psychic powers, Mothra cameos, space aliens, and of course kaiju brawling. Does the film remind us why we love Godzilla in the first place, or does it make us possibly reflect on the entire franchise with a bit more of a critical lens? Thank you so much for listening and supporting us here on the podcast. Now let's get to our review of Godzilla vs. SpaceGodzilla. Okay, Jack, thank you so much for joining me today to discuss some classic Godzilla. I don't know why on this podcast, because I'm not like a MonsterVerse stan. I've not really enjoyed, I think, like fully any film from that series, but for some reason we've covered all of them. I see you have your poster back there. You're obviously maybe a bigger stan than I am, but we've talked about a lot. Godzilla is back in the mainstream after Godzilla -1, the sequel, I believe, coming out later this year. Plenty of Godzilla to go around, but we on this podcast have not discussed classic Godzilla in really any form. So I'm so excited today to get into Godzilla versus SpaceGodzilla. Kind of a random one to pick out. Obviously, next year we got Godzilla x Kong Supernova, which seems to be taking a space element, so this seems very fitting. But that is what we're going to roll with today as our selection. Jack, first I want to hear from you, not even necessarily about this one, but I'm just curious, is Godzilla something you grew up watching? What is your connection to Godzilla, especially this classic Godzilla? Like, is this a new discovery? Is this something that you have a long history with? What is your history with Godzilla?
Well, it's funny you mention this because Godzilla for me, the first sort of I would say avenue towards it would be the Roland Emmerich. I think it's the 1999 or the 2000 version. I remember I had it on VHS and DVD, and I remember the VHS was green as well. I remember for years and years, it was one of my prized possessions. So I remember growing up on that. And then it's funny, fast forward 25 years later. And then I didn't know I had this, but apparently there's loads of pictures of me as a kid with a Godzilla hat as well, with the logo, with the OG Roland Emmerich. So I'm a stan. And I've been to Japan with my wife as well. So we got to go see a bit of the Toho house, and the stuff is it was probably 2016 to maybe 2018 around that time. So it was the Gareth Edwards redevelopment in the States of it. So it had a bit of a blossoming. I've been in and out of this franchise, bar the Roland Emmerich one. I can watch that for some good fun, but I've seen a lot. There's 3 eras of it, isn't there? There's I've seen the Showa era. I've seen considerable amount of that. I got a little bit into the 70s stuff, and then I started the 90s stuff, which ironically enough, the one we're going to talk about today is the next one I needed to have watched in my viewing anyway, so this has worked out really well for me, so thank you. But I've noticed that, I don't know about you, it'd be interesting to get your opinion after this as well, is that I stop and start this a lot. I can never sit through more than 4 at a time. The last times I watched this was, I think, February, ironically enough, 2 years ago now. That was my last entry. I know we've done a few of the American versions on here as well, and we've been very kind to them, I'm sure. And by all accounts, Monarch, the thing on Apple TV, is getting really good reviews. So maybe that's something to watch. More long form television might be more appropriate to it. But I'm in and out of this. I like what I've seen, but I'm very much in and out of it. The 50s ones get silly. I think we spoke about this before. The 70s ones are interesting. The 90s ones we're going to talk about today. There's a lot to discuss. I've got some hot takes about this franchise as well, which I feel is interesting enough. But I'll throw it back to you. What about you then?
So my introduction was the MonsterVerse. It was Godzilla 2014, was it? Didn't really love all of them, but King of Monsters was coming out, and very similar to an MCU stan who has to catch up. Everyone around me or everyone online is like, "Oh my god, it's this monster, it's this monster." And having not seen the originals, I have no idea who these monsters are. So I was like, "Let me go ahead," and I binge watched every single Godzilla film in a month period, which I would not recommend. I think going in and out is how you want to do it. I did that, and I also did all the Bonds 1 month, and I think Bond was even more detrimental doing it in that form. Maybe we'll get there in a couple months. But certainly with Godzilla, I just got through through all of them. I have not seen Monarch. That's the only like real Godzilla
Hmm.
main property I have not seen. I don't know why, because I do watch. I mean, I think we both watch stuff on Apple TV Plus. Just for some reason, despite that getting great reviews, never turned it
Yeah.
on for whatever reason. But I was excited because I've really put Godzilla when I watched that 2019 probably ish. I kind of left it there. I haven't really touched a lot of this older stuff since. So I was excited to get in and just kind of revisit in its own context a film that, with at least Godzilla vs. SpaceGodzilla on round one, I don't remember a lot from. This was not one that made a huge impression. This is not one that I walked away
Mhm.
just standing. So I was excited just like in its own vacuum, separate from all the other films around it, separate than this big marathon. How does this film stack up? And I can start with just general thoughts, because I will be honest, I think this is a rather poor Godzilla film, if I'm being honest. There's just so much in this film, and when you read about the production, how they wanted the US just to take over, but they just kept having to make movies as the US delayed and delayed making their film. You have a director here, it's his only time in the Godzilla franchise. He mostly works with teen idol content.
Mm.
It's a weird fit. You have a lot of ideas here that I'm sure we'll get into, both obviously with the Godzilla DNA out in the universe has energy that it connects to, and now it's this evil monster, mixed with a plot of humans trying to control Godzilla. There's a whole crime subplot. You have a little Mothra tease here and there. You have little Godzilla for some reason with like an anime redo where he just looks like a big anime doll. There's a lot here, and I just don't know if it really came together for me. Definitely some highlights. I mean, I think when you look at early Godzilla, while yes, some of the effects here are poor, it was also on a very, very tight budget. Practical effects always hold up more in those opening segments where I assume it's miniatures of all the different mechanisms opening up and the like Gazmos gadgets. Stunning, like goosebumps. Love that. Love the vibe. It's so fun. But yeah, not really a big fan of this film as a whole. What are your thoughts?
Right. I agree with you to a lot of extent. This is going to be quite bland of a conversation, I imagine, because I'm going to be quite mute to this. I find all of them about the big hitters. So the first one in '54, and there's a few other dots of really good inspiration. I find them just pleasant to watch. I don't think there's anything that goes above a 3 star for me. Not to give the game away earlier, but I find them all to be like pleasant enough watchers, and they're very much sort of like echoes of each other. Like if you squint, like four of them are exactly the same. And there's a few before these. I like how they tie it into the narratives of the few films before, and there's quite an interesting one because they're also taking inspiration for that now in the American stuff. Um, I think it's just sort of like a very simplistic ride for me, and this is just nothing different. Um, I I don't know necessarily what the circumstances of this, because like what you said, it's a mid-90s film. The middle of the 90s, 94 is the revolution of the independent movie anyway, like with the Pulp Fiction, True Romance, that type of era. Um, and this one just feels like I'll go into this segment now because I wanted to bring it up later, but you actually mentioned this. You mentioned James Bond to this, and James Bond's got like a major sort of like affection in my heart. I'm a major fan of James Bond. I'm British as well, so it's like got a lovely affection for it. I think these franchises are eerily similar in that they go through very similar type of narratives, and they just change the iconography and the face of it, and they give it a facelift every 10, 15 years. But ultimately, it stays the same. The difference between the two of them, I think, is that this is only about 8 years older than Bond. Is that Bond has to sort of, well, like Godzilla and Bond, every 10, 15 years there's a change. There's probably just not enough change with this, and they probably should have been. I know there's 3 eras, but when you get into the 90s, and granted, I think the miniature work looks amazing. I love miniature work. I think it's fascinating. I think that whole opening segment with the when they put in Mechagodzilla together in that type of edit. I have like a soft spot for stuff like that, and Bond did stuff like that, early miniature stuff. But this came out I think a year or 2 years before GoldenEye, and GoldenEye in the opening of that film has loads of miniature work as well with the trains and the tanks. And when you compare the two, and bear in mind, like it's like the Brits have Bond, the Japanese have Godzilla, and the Americans have like the superhero stuff or whatever you guys just buy out right anyway, and you call it your own. There's not a problem with that. Capitalism for the win. But it's an interesting one. It's like an industry standard, but this one doesn't feel like a big enough evolution. Now, granted, it's like what you said about the miniature work. It's always going to look better than CGI. It doesn't age. But even to that degree, the mid-90s is a really awkward one for film. Really awkward. Some of the stuff looks really good, and then some stuff looks terrible. And we're at that point now within the era of film, cinema that we're in now, that the 90s is beginning to age quite dramatically. And early 2000s stuff looks even worse for some reason. But the 90s stuff doesn't look very good. So I can understand that it's probably aged better, but it just feels like there's no evolution to it. And I think that's perhaps a sentiment of the Japanese, that if it's not broken, don't fix it. And I sort of appreciate that. But this is the 21st film in that franchise, in '94, the 21st. And to me, it just needed sort of a lick of paint. And I think the iconography of SpaceGodzilla is interesting enough with the crystals. And we'll get on to certain things at the end, but I agree with you. I think there's more so an issue of who this is targeted for, and who's gonna who the actual audience is for this now. And I think that's what happened to Bond throughout its era. If it's Lazenby in '69, if it's Roger Moore in '85 with A View to Kill, or Timothy Dalton and then Pierce Brosnan, and then with Daniel Craig, there's a sort of an idea of what the culture wants, and then what it's given. And I think this one's a strange one, where I think it's trying to keep the honor and the homage to very, very tight and keep it in house. And I think bringing a director such as that, who sort of do you know what it reminds me of, actually? It reminds me of The Amazing Spider-Man, in a way, where you bring, I never remember this guy's name. I don't know if it's actually Webb. I can't remember. The guy
Mark Webb.
Mark Webb. There's an interesting experiment there, where you bring someone in who primarily works very much on emotion and thematics and a richness of that. And it's a very character-driven type of director, who 500 Days of Summer. And then you try to bring that sentiment into a blockbuster, whereas the CGI and all that takes care of itself because the iconography is built. But trying to find the intimacy of it. And I think to some extent of how much those two films are flawed, the highlight, of course, is that central relationship between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. I think the idea is to try and do that here, because everything else takes care of itself, and that emotional arc between the characters. And to be fair, not that I fell for it here, but I think I have not. No, it's true that there's one really beautiful scene here with the sunset, where it's going red, and it's obviously on a green screen sunset, but it's just a rich Japanese. It's like the red's burning sun. There's just like a beauty to that. I think she looks extremely attractive as well. She looks extremely pretty. And there's like this use of like the Nancy Sinatra, again, the Bond thing as well, which is like You Only Live Twice melody throughout this film as well, which has been lifted. And they're on a beach. Like, there's an interesting, it'd be interesting to see where in 1994 where the Olympics were, or if there was a World Cup. I don't think the World Cup was there, but the Olympics weren't in Japan. I'm not too sure. You watched all those long form documentaries of the Olympics. I don't know if you've got to that yet. I think you'll be like 75 when you get to there, so I'll let you get on with that. But I don't know. There's like there's an interesting idea here, and it only had one more to go, and then it goes to a different era, which I haven't touched on yet. But just to backtrack as well, it's very difficult to actually access these things in England. Very difficult. And I think the one thing that brought it back to popularity the last few years was Criterion released the Godzilla box set that you guys have had for a while over here, and it just went like that. But I'm pretty sure it's just the Showa era. I don't think it's anything else. So to watch these is very difficult to access, and I think what I've looked to, because if anyone is aware of I like watching different versions of films because I'm strange, and there's a lot of difference between international cuts and domestic versions of films here. And I watched it in dub, so I watched the international cut. I don't know if it's majorly different. I know other things are different as well. A few of the ones beforehand I have, so I'm not too sure. I think we may probably watch the same thing here. So it would have been interesting to see what the Japanese version would have been like. But again, just to do a long story short here, I think these things are pleasant, they're fun, but they're very much aged. They're a great relationship to have for like to have both type of audiences of a generational balance. I find. I don't know if you do. Like, you can definitely they're catering for like we're here to watch Godzilla destroy stuff. Then they're older generation, for more not political, but like these socially cultural issues that divide things. And then you've got like the younger generation where it's like little Godzilla and stuff like the big mecha thing. So there's a lot there that they're trying to balance here. And I think they're fine, but it just never ever goes beyond that degree of this is interesting. I don't find anything exhilarating here, and by all accounts, I don't think the consensus is anything different than that anywhere.
No, I think that's very fair. I think your assessment on the franchise overall, I mean, I echo pretty much. There's obviously going to be some that stick out as more fun to every
Yeah,
individual human, but I don't think nor do I think the conversation at large really points to many like individual entries as being really a transcendent piece of the genre. You do get into kind of a formula here. There are some things that are interesting here, like you mentioned the continuity and the story continuing from previous arcs. That adds some rich texture to some of these characters that make them a little bit more interesting than some of the other entries. I agree. The sunset is gorgeous in that one scene. It's like
yeah,
the opening of
it is,
House, if you've ever seen, where it's just bright orange. I mean, it looks like a
mhm.
fire behind her. And it's stunning. I just think the biggest thing for me here is that the tone, as a result of everything going on, is so complicated. Where you have that beautiful moment, and you have some stuff here about love and relationships and stuff, which works. But at the same time, you have like the Yakuza side plot. You have the psychic abilities in one scene that almost looks like a horror movie, like parody almost. And then you mentioned like you have SpaceGodzilla, which I will say my personal flavor is I'm always less interested by the Godzilla creatures and just in general, I guess, with monster films when it's just the main character just in a different form. I think it's a little bit restrictive, especially here where you have flying dragons in other movies and you have big moths and you have
Mhm.
all this cool iconography. I think the iconography of SpaceGodzilla for me is it's like, well, it's Godzilla with crystals, which is fair enough. And I like how it changes like the city and stuff. I think the scope here of the action is solid. But it's not the most inspiring design in my opinion. And I wouldn't say the action really evolves that or elevates that. But he is for like a Godzilla villain. He's not a villain being like controlled by aliens to do bad. Like he just wants to destroy the earth. I appreciate that it's like darker and more serious. And he's, kidnaps Godzilla's little anime doll son, which is like an emotional moment for monsters that they don't normally get. I think everything with monsters, I guess, what I'm getting at. It's like good. I just think like the tone is crazy. I don't know your thoughts on Little Godzilla. He just was not working for me here. There's some cute moments, especially towards the end. There's one moment that I think is really cute. But overall, like just everything about this character, which is providing this franchise when it comes to villains, one of probably its most venomous characters. It just continually like undercuts it. I feel like it continually just gets lost in these like long stretches of human drama that are just not really that interesting. The conversation here about trying to control Godzilla, and then you have our woman who's grown up engaging with this monster in a way that feels very similar to actually some of the storytelling in the Monsterverse series. But she's like, no, Godzilla has his own thoughts and it's wrong to take control or try to ruin his autonomy. I don't know. That conversation just felt very not needed for me. Like when you have a threat, I think as strong as SpaceGodzilla, that's enough to carry a film as a focus and an
Mhm.
intensity. And I feel like everything really should be centered around that. And I get that Godzilla tries to be fun. I'm describing like a much more venomous film, but I think this is like when you go to Bond, and not that I love every Bond entry, but I do appreciate that as those films grow more campy, it embraces the camp. It embraces with its villains and with its conflicts and with its plots. To where I think tonally, it's very rare to find a Bond film. They do exist, but it's rare to find a Bond film that seemingly both is trying to be campy fun while also trying to take itself super seriously in the way that I think this film does try to balance. Again, I think some of that also comes from this director who's worked mostly with these smaller dramas. You do get quite a bit of like melodrama here that works
Yeah.
sometimes, doesn't work other times. It just I wish this had a clearer vision behind it, because I think all aspects are like working. There's nothing here that's disastrous or horribly boring. It just feels like it gets mushed together and it doesn't have that clear vision, I think.
Yeah, again to reiterate, I agree with everything you basically said there. There's a lot of there's a lot of difficulties that this franchise gets itself caught into, because the one thing that works, that's dynamic, is the iconography, its central creature, the title character. But there's very little you can actually do to emote from that character either. And once the balances change from Godzilla's now not a bad guy to a good guy now, it's like it becomes very one note. And I think the interesting thing about the Bond comparison is that franchise is afforded to have a facelift every 10 years, like we said, and you can have like TV villain of the week, but in each entry, it's like a just totally different thing there. If it's someone from South America with cocaine, like License to Kill, or it's Zorin, Christopher Morgan's the blonde hair. There's sort of like this richness, there's a quirkiness to it, but there's all this feels like an identifiable difference. And granted, there's all it perhaps might just be this facelift, and if you dig a little deeper, it's the same type of sentiments. Or we want to rule the world. We want this financial domination. But this is somewhat this is somewhat similar. And the two things that they have to do here, and again, I'm not speaking to a layman here. I don't want to patronise anyone. Is that they have to at least give some emotive investment with its creature, and then you've got the humans, and the two things have affected this franchise, even the American stuff. And the one thing I think Gareth Edwards probably got away with is that they hid Godzilla in 2014's Godzilla as much as he could do, for two reasons. First, it builds up great suspense and tension. Granted, on the other side of that, you don't get to see the creature, but then you have to make, not a maybe, you have to make a rich and dynamic central character arc there. I think that film prospers with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen, as well as with the build up with Bryan Cranston. I think that's out of all the films I've made is easily the best feature, because you have to work with these characters. And I think that there's like a really nice, there's a a bit like really nice richness and texture and color to those characters, especially in Japan in the opening sequence with Bryan Cranston and his wife. I mean, as a cold opening goes, and not to know what's there, but we do ultimately know, but we know it's something else. What turns out later on in the film, you've already capitalized on that. We don't necessarily know what this creature is going to be anymore. We don't know if it's good or bad, and that's now been swung again already to make him a good guy. And the issue is that they tried to do the same thing with King Kong, and then now we're on the same length as King Kong, so that you can only go a certain film arc with these characters. And this suffers from the issues that the American sequels had, where Millie Bobby Brown's character has got a sibling that's been lost to the devastation of there's an interesting link there, but it almost reminds. I'm not going to waffle here. Please forgive me. This is going to make sense, but it reminds me somewhat of the opening to Batman vs Superman, where you're watching the devastation before from an alternate view, and it's interesting, and it's an opening to that texture, but that should be 45 minutes long, and it shouldn't just be a 10-minute interval. You should be in with that devastation to understand those characters, and I think the writing takes the viewer for granted, because we know how big those spectacles are, and because we've seen previous entries, we understand that the world building. But I think here it's just not as rich, it's not as compelling, and it's just very one note in that boy meets girl, girl meets boy, so on and so forth, and then there's something in the way, and humanity has to come to the boy, because the girl's more connected to nature and stuff like that. It's very much like simplistic narrative stuff. I would presume very much like Godzilla oriented within this franchise as well. I mean, aside from that, there's very little there to the word gripping comes to mind for me. I don't know if for you, I don't find anything here gripping. I don't find anything here overtly compelling. And then they have to double down on little Godzilla being a ruckus, let's say. And I'm saying that with peace and love. I just think that's such a cheapness to do that in order to get an emotional connection, because your monster can't emote, and your human characters are doing so much of it. It's becoming boring, and it's just the catch-22. It's constantly making an error here to make a positive. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it goes on and on and on, and before long, it's all come together and everyone's sorted, but you're still left with nothing in the middle. I just feel it's the same here. I mean, but we spoke about this a lot throughout this franchise, so I don't want to repeat myself. But we've had this chat about the last one, where it's like, what are the human people like? The one with Rebecca Hall, is that the one? Is she in two of them? I've lost the plot with them. I'm
I think
not.
she's been like all of them, yeah. But I think especially in this last one, it was
Yeah,
rough.
it's like it's not King of Monsters. It's the one before that, where it's like, oh, you know, what are they here for? And they have to make them in the end, don't they? They have to bring them in the end, and it's like, oh, it's not needed. And that young girl who's, oh, I know, I believe she's deaf in the films. It's a great little touch there as well, just to give, like, not only for representation, but it's a great little touch. I like that, because it's like the Millie Bobby Brown thing before it, where, you know, there needs to be a little bit more variety. Let's say I find that that girl, the casting is just like really well done, and I think here there's some stuff similar, but I just get lost in the fizz of like, oh, okay. I mean, in 45 minutes, I just was like, oh,
And
perhaps that's the cruelest the statement of all. Is that after if 45 minutes to go, 45 minutes in, sorry, I'm just like, you know, is this boring me now? Maybe that's too harsh, but I keep on getting those sort of like feelings from it. I don't know how you feel.
you're not wrong. I mean, this is the issue with human characters in every single, I feel like, one of these films from
Yeah,
beginning to end, where it's like, even that little girl, which I think we're both fans of her casting and both fans of like that touch. Ultimately, in the plot, when you have these giant monsters, there's only so much of relevance and weight when that is the focus that these human characters can have. When you're watching their arcs or you're watching their plots, tends to be pretty boring. It tends to feel pretty sidelined from the action. And I would say here is, just as much as ever before. I would not say this finds overly compelling ways to get the characters involved, the human characters. And even beyond that, there's so much where the characters will have like full on action sequences away from the monsters with other humans, with some of these side plots. It's just not overly interesting. It's not overly like well done. I don't know. It just feels very, I would say,
it's very
standard at best.
mundane. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
mundane.
know.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Um, and it's just, again, when it's so difficult because also like you cannot fill even an 80-minute runtime with just monsters. You have to have these elements. And I guess they do try again with some of the arcs that have been continuing from other films, but I agree, nothing is gripping here. Nothing is emotional. And at the end, it's not like any of them feel like they've gone on this journey or changed in a way where I'm really like endeared to these characters or I feel connected to them in any way. Like it just feels very, very standard. Have you seen Godzilla minus one yet?
Yeah, yeah, saw it in the cinema. I was really impressed with it. Again,
Yeah.
another like that film is a perfect example of what I was mentioning about Mark Webb, where that is a Japanese like kitchen sink. The name has escaped me. The incredibly famous Japanese director. One of my friends from university is like absolutely loves him. I can never remember his name. You'll know who I'm
Kurosawa?
talking. No, earlier
No.
than that, like the 30s and 40s. Very
Uh,
kitchen drama.
Ozu?
Yeah, Ozu. Yeah,
Oh my god,
it's
my favorite filmmaker of all time. Come on, Jack.
I can never remember his name. Sorry. That's an Ozu film with Godzilla in, and I think when you pick something like that, I think studios were like, "Oh, it's brilliant." It's like Batman, The Dark Knight's Heat with Batman in, and
Yeah.
those combinations are really interesting to do, but they've got to be somewhat similar. You've got to be able to meet them two in the middle, you know. And I think 550 days, 500 Days of Summer, and Spider Man is like, oh, ooh, there's it's going to be getting square pegs and round holes there, but it'll work, but it'll be a chore. But when you look at an Ozu, like a kitchen sink drama, let's say, and you put it within that era, and you put a monster in there that represents something, and you're talking about repressed rage from a war and uh, embarrassment and emotional embarrassment, like a cultural issues there and stuff, so on and so forth. There's just like a rich blossoming already of like
Yeah.
brooding thematic way underbelly that's ultimately acts like a bounty castle. So if you're gonna fall, it's gonna help you fall. At least it's gonna save at that. Um, and that's where that works really well. And also as well, it's fabulously directed. It looks
Yes.
amazing. I can understand in the 90s, it's not really sort of the embodiment of what this franchise is going for, and it ultimately it takes a Skyfall to be a View to a Kill, or a Die Another Day. Let's say you've got to have respite, you've got to have a cultural reset and go back to what makes it work. And there's nothing wrong with going back to the source, the well. I have major issues where it's like constantly reiterate throughout. You've got to have a little bit of either or. But 1994, if you look at its contemporaries of that era and you look at sort of the franchise, it's a few years before John Woo gets in America as well. So, there's probably, well, no, John Woo was probably there in the early 90s as well. But, with Hard Target, I think it's 93. So, but you're on this cusp of that. And I still think there's a cultural issue there. And I think editorial issues there. But again, I go back to you. It's just, it's just a franchise that I think runs out of steam. And I also think making these every like year or so is like the Star Wars disease, where it becomes not necessarily a spectacle, but as a spectator. And that's why sport is interesting, where if it's every 2 or 4 years, you have to wait for it. It then becomes like this great anticipation of that. And by diluting these characters, I think you take away great resonation with them as well, because then you can play about with the era. I mean, when we looked at like Frankenstein or Dracula, and you look at those evolutions, they're always quite interesting. That very few directors modernize them.
Yeah.
They don't set them in a contemporary era. They always go back to the source because it's just too rich. It just works. But then they do attempt to do that on occasion, like The Mummy. Go back to the ClapperCast recording there. That's an interesting one. And they've also done like Frankenstein and Dracula Untold for a small portion. Spoiler, but there's an interesting thing. And Dracula did it with the TV show with Bang Olufsen probably a few years ago now. It just seems to lose something, doesn't it? The identity of those characters. And I think Godzilla's an interesting one where I think probably for a time, and granted, I wasn't even alive at this point, so I'm speaking out my arse here. But I do wonder if there was a conversation, Carson, where do we take this in the 21st century? Where do we go now? Because nuclear threat, the Cold War, is slowly simmering to an end. There's a lot of like Soviet things in this Japanese era as well, because of the connections they have there. That's then simmering down. Afghanistan's calmed down with the Soviets and the Americans as well. So, the 21st century, you go into a technological age. Where does Godzilla sit with that there? I think it was an interesting one. I just think it's probably, let's just quickly get this out, shoot it, make it sort of like a drama, not a teen drama, but very much sort of those identities, and then let's just see where it goes. I think there's I don't want to be disrespectful. I guess there's a sense of like lack of passion towards this, or maybe I'm just speaking like out of turn here, so I do apologize if anyone's like, oh, actually this art director. I appreciate that. I just think that sometimes your ship runs adrift, and you have to anchor. I'm not a sailor. I don't know where I'm going with this. Please stay with me. But sometimes to get back on course, you just don't want to just go. You need to drop anchor and just sort out where you are, I think. And with the comparison to this franchise, I think it needed to have a calm, a step, and I dare to say this because I know there's a few issues after this. It probably needed Emmerich to make that and see what the Americans wanted, and the fact that the Americans not necessarily pushed that away, but because of its issues that film had and it didn't take off, this probably needed to have a setback or a reset just to calm down, see where the market goes. And then when 2014 to bring it back is an interesting one. I think it probably needed that. Probably there's about 20 years there. I know there's a few entries here, there, and everywhere, but in the
early 2000s, there's a few.
There's a good another go. I've never seen them. They're very difficult to find out. And then there's a lot of like Netflix stuff and yeah, I think it probably needed that. I just think things just run the course, don't they? And I think you can tell when something's running out of steam. It just doesn't have anything else to say. and you could probably argue that it didn't have 10 years before, so it's running on steam here, and it's just
Yeah.
it becomes very evident, doesn't it?
And I don't think anyone, I mean, and I know that the Godzilla stans are one of the most passionate, right? But right underneath Eternals, they're one of the most passionate fan bases. So this is not to trigger anyone at home, but like, I would say even probably the creators did not like claim that they were doing something, phenomenally passionate here, or they were trying to really evolve this.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very just kind of going through the motion, monster of the week almost. As far as like, yeah, here's some basic narratives, but ultimately it does feel like they just made another Godzilla film kind of because they had to, not because they had this brand new take. And I don't think that's wrong. I agree. I mean, I think number one, I think the US Godzilla film is a little bit underrated. I think some people are a little harsh on it. I do think the early 2000s stuff is really good. I think that reset, really? It is distinctly different. I remember it being pretty good. And then what? It was, go for it. No, go for it.
Just a question here, because we you're programming your Oscars, Academy Awards stuff, and we had the conversation a few weeks ago about how to look at something contemporary, but also appreciate when it was released in its current time, and the two differences and how that's aged. And we have the benefit of if it's aged well or if it's not aged very well, and we can identify that, and the culture that we live in now associates with different things, so we can have a discussion about that. So it's interesting just to look at that through the prism of this. I have a feeling, I'm not going to speak for you now, I have a feeling though, let's say if this came out now, or let's go back. Let's say we were there in 94 and we were doing this in 94. Go back in time. I don't think me and you would be much anticipating where this was going forward. I think this would be it for us. I don't think how this film finishes, what it has to say. There's very little to go back for, not necessarily even round two, but to continue. I would just be just like, no, I just don't think we would clamour for anything else. And I think that's predominantly what the critical reception and the cultural reception was for it as well. I think even now, I don't have any anticipation to go back to see where the next one goes to end the era. It just for me, I think that's where it starts and stops. I get to one or two films toward the end of said era, if it's Showa or the other two, and I just I have just nothing left to get to be given to it. It's just one of those on the cusp of like, do you know? He's gonna hate me for this, but he's not on here, so you can deal with it. I don't mean to upset the Italian here, right? But it reminds me of like, it reminds me of the latter, like midway through Twin Peaks season 2.
Oh God!
And it's like, I'm just sat there watching. I'm like, what? 24 episodes of this. It's boring. Like nothing's happening. What's keeping me to watch the next hour episode? What's getting me to come back every week? And then slowly but surely, I just have nothing to go back to. And there's a point, isn't there, where it's not a breaking point, let's say, but I've had it through like the Resident Evil TV show on Netflix. I had this as well. I was like, episode 2, I'm not going back for this shit anymore. And I have in TV, you have that. It's just no point watching 10 hours of anything. Yeah. There's got to be a cut-off. I would, at the time in 94, and even now, not that these are poor, but they're just so unimaginative, let's say. I have absolutely no pull to go back for anything like here again. And this, I would rather go watch Emmerich's version. And I know that's like a sin. And I know people will be like, you bastard. You've annihilated Lynch. You've gone on about this, and you've shit all over him. You're saying Bond's brilliant and so forth. And it's not necessarily that. I just think that you can feel it in your water that's done here. And I just halfway through this, I'm just it's not for me. I think, and I'm not trying to shit on it because there's the small moments here I quite like we both mentioned, but. Oh, dear me! It takes something out of you to watch this, doesn't it? It's just there's nothing here at all, is there?
No, I mean, I think, and we've had this conversation. I think we've both been pretty negative. Not negative. I think we've been critical, and I will say I think the film's like innocent. I don't hold hate in my heart for this.
100%.
Film. I think it plays better now than it would back in the 90s, just because now at least we have nostalgia for like the like
Oh yeah.
practical effects and stuff. That was just common practice then. I know I don't think this would have like got me in the theater being like, oh, I can't wait for the next one. I don't think we would necessarily be, oh my gosh, this is incredible or worthy. Yeah, I would say it would probably even be a little bit more damning back then, because at least now I can appreciate the production elements and be like, oh, that was really a
Mhm.
dying art. That's gone in the 90s. So it's just kind of, yeah, I don't know. I feel like with these, I mean, you said that you take these big breaks from it. I definitely see that. And I think that's probably the best way to watch these. It's how I have no interest in just continuing this franchise. I have no interest in like, oh, let's program, another Godzilla next month for this. That's not,
Yeah,
it's not really that interest in me. I would see
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think if this was back on like the era where you would really like just kind of like scroll TV to watch something, I think for me, if there was these classic Godzillas playing every once in a while, if I was just scrolling through TV and nothing else really was on, I could definitely watch these. I struggle to think of a time, especially I guess this era of Godzilla. Again, there are highlights here and there, but I would struggle to think of a time where I would like, oh, you know what I want to do today? I want to watch Godzilla versus SpaceGodzilla again. It's there. I don't know. Again, I don't want to trigger anyone who like loves this film or loves this
Mhm.
franchise. It's hard. It's hard to muster up any like passion for this. Really, same way like
Yeah.
it's hard to muster up any venom for it either. I definitely again don't like think this film is like just a disgrace on this. I just think this is what the genre, not the genre, but this is what the franchise is. When you get
Yes.
past those initial first films, it's just like it becomes this very what we're talking about today. I don't know. That it's just kind of how it is.
No, I completely agree. And I think to just reiterate, this is not a bad film. It's not poorly made at all. There's nothing like, which is like, oh
It's not
my
like David Lynch's work for you.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
right.
No, it's not like Twin Peaks Part. Well, it is very similar to doing, but we'll have to move on from that because that might just be a sore spot for me. But I don't think this is like horrendous, or I don't think this is horrible at any stage. I don't think this is disingenuous whatsoever. I just feel like it's very much at a cultural point where you can tell it's burnt out. And I think watching something like that, you just get the impression like you just know when the gig's up. You just and it's different from an era now where I suppose the only thing that you can have similar now is probably Bond or the MCU, and I think on both occasions throughout my lifespan, on either one, you've felt that moment at times, and I just think that we're in a different because it's more of a universal product. The MCU, they pump it out for a lot more people, and therefore it generates still a gargantuan amount of cash, but just probably a lesser cultural heritage than other things have probably prospered, like the first Iron Man, or the Captain America stuff, or even the first few Avengers movies, let's say. But it's interesting that with this you have one more, and then they sort of put it on ice and be like, let the Americans deal with it, or just let's see what the Americans do, because obviously they took on some of the franchise in at least. I find that probably more so a detriment, and well, not so detriment, but that speaks volumes that the Japanese who hold this as a cultural icon in Japan. It's a heritage feature. It's all over Japan where I went, like Shibuya and all like that. Like it's massive. They still sell vintage Godzilla like toys and stuff in these stuff, and all the new ones are there and all sorts of stuff. It's major business, major business, a cultural heritage thing that they were, granted they probably got a lot of money from Emmerich, if it's not the Weinsteins, whatever, whoever it was, but to allow to pause and let the Americans dictate, and I think reading between the lines, I think they were horrified about how they treat Godzilla on occasion there as well, and I think that's why there were certain issues until 2014 where they've got to rent the characters out now. And the Mothra one, I think they had issues with Mothra and so on and so forth, and they had an issue putting Mothra in a film with certain other characters. So anyway, I'll digress. But I think that speaks volumes. But like you said, it's interesting to be able to see this now in connection with where we are now in 2026 and not in 1994. But you just get that feeling of, I don't know, maybe it's because maybe we're probably worn out of a lot of stuff, but you see it through a lot of eras that you like you said, you can watch a lot of it where you can definitely pinpoint stumbling blocks, and then where things get, you know, the gas, the paddle gets taken off a little bit. A View to a Kill is one of them. You Only Live Twice is another one. Dying of the Day is another one. Spectre is another one, and these films are afforded to in James Bond. They have another hit because there's a cultural heritage to it, but it's also universal. The MCU has also had issues like this. We've mentioned this multiple times. There's a lot there where you would be like, this would kill another franchise. Like they've had duds after dud after dud, terrible stuff. This is nowhere near that. I think this has still got a bit of a heart and soul to it, but it's just tired, isn't it? Here, it's just very, very tired. It would be interesting to see these early 2000 ones you've said. I just don't want to. I don't know. Just this, it just sort of really soiled it for me with this. It was like, oh, this is interesting, and then I swear to God, towards the final battle, I'm like, have I not seen this before? Like, I just feel like I've seen everything here before as well. I feel like I saw it with the one with the big plant in. It just feels very much ripped from one thing to another, and another to another, and then somehow there's an amalgamation of just something that you've seen before that is new, and my brain has a real trouble accepting that because I feel somewhat cheated, which again, it's a personal issue. I don't know who you feel that Carson, but it'd be interesting to see the next one. Like you said, now I wouldn't be bothered in 1994, and even now I'm like, I'll get around to it. But it'd be interesting to see what they do with that, considering how just like dull this was, and they need to get rid of that Son of Godzilla thing. That needs to go. And then the early 2000s, I think if something comes up like you said, if there's some availability, I see it anywhere, I'll probably give that a watch because that's just the one bit away I haven't got my toes dipped into. But I'm like you. I'm sorry for people. This is going to be a mortal sin here. So anyone, I know I've pissed so many people off. But like you, I would probably go watch Emmerich's version. Maybe that's more of an eternal nostalgia thing, like you mentioned. Maybe that's comfort food for us. But this
Well, I
seems
don't
to
have
be.
nostalgia towards that. I watched that after I watched this one for the first time,
Oh
so
right,
I
no,
didn't
I
grow. I
can't
didn't
right,
grow up with that
actually.
at
Well,
all.
you're not a real stan. Sorry, gang. I'm so sorry for that.
I'll take it. It's
I was
okay.
there from day one. I have the hat somewhere to prove it. That's for like a 6-year-old somewhere in my mum and dad's house. I have like a strange nostalgia for that, but that I think, like you said, like that's quite tongue in cheek. It treats the whole thing as like a bit silly, but then when that monster's on screen, like it sort of, I don't know, for me, it sort of like nails it a little bit. Where the design's not very good, and the rain is. Have you? What version did you seen that film? Have you seen it in like Super 4K yet?
No, no. I
If you
just
watch,
I don't.
if you
Some
watch it in
bad
Super,
version.
if you watch it in Super 4K, they've actually altered certain things in it where I think it's darker now because when the Blu-ray came out or HD DVD, it sort of lightened everything, and the rain was so bad with the creature design that I think when it got upscaled to 4K, they changed it as well, and they darkened it on the 4K. It's been changed a few times, but it was like on video because the VHS was so terrible, it sort of like worked. Whereas on DVD and Blu-ray, it hasn't really, hasn't really had a life. But going back to the point, it's just strange how that sort of feels similar to this in that it gets like the tongue in cheek and it's a bit, it's a bit silly. But I don't think it, I don't think it degrades that monster in any way. Whereas these features sort of a bit tongue in cheek, a bit fun, and then you get Son of Godzilla. If you're talking about a terrestrial being falling down with like DNA in a black hole, and it's going to destroy the world, and crystals come out, that's quite exciting, like you said, and it's a fun iconography. It's not, and it's interesting to me. I probably it's not as great as like a three-headed dragon. No idea what that creature's called. I know this is terrible. I've had a difficult week, but my mind's everywhere. I couldn't even remember Ozu, so I apologise for any sins out there. I'm just so sorry. Please, I'm so sorry. To any of the cinephiles out there, thank God we're not on Twitter anymore anyway, because this would be horrific. Anyway, I just think that when you compare the two, and I'm probably just absolutely slagging off this compared to the Roland Emmerich, and people are screaming like, no, no. But I do think that this probably takes itself a little bit too serious with its relationship dynamic. And then you've got Son of Godzilla, and it's just gimmicky and silly. I think, like you said, there's just a tonal imbalance here. But at that point, who's there to take this on? You know, in the 90s, who's there to just take it on? It'd be so interesting to know the cultural reception in Japan at the time. Like, were they even bothered at that point anymore? Had it just sort of run its course then? It'd be so interesting to read about. But again, it's a very little amount of information out there for that.
Well, and also it's interesting, like the monster genre, kaiju genre, I guess, let's say, in Japan at the time was like still a thing. There was a lot of different
Mhm.
monsters on the big screen outside of Godzilla. So I'm curious if like was the reception, I mean, I also just haven't seen those films, is the genre itself strong and Godzilla's weakening? Is the actual genre overall weakening? I don't know the evolution of that. Also the seeming, like, not death of it, but it does start to grow quieter as the years go on. I mean, that's context I'd love to have, but yeah, I don't have that. But interesting thought.
Well, it's like this is a bit of a long spiel here, but I've got like a theory here. I think there's a cultural difference here where the teamwork, where to build the Mecha Godzilla, is like everyone has to come together, but you can split away, but everything has to come together. But it's like more adult orientated in this film to a certain extent. Like, it's like people who are military people and they've got to save the world. But when you look at the English and American versions of this, it's like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers stuff, and they like come together, and it's all very like that was like my pose then. Sorry for any Power Rangers fans out there. This is not the podcast for you, but I get the impression like that when I'm a little bit older than you, but I remember like being like watching it like maybe on the cusp of being like this is boring, like this is just silly. Power Rangers for me was like just stupid kids in stupid outfits. You know, it's like this just looks corny and cheap. And then you watch like the modern day versions of it, and it looks even worse. I think that's like slowly but surely bled into the cultural manifestation in America, where it's like it's just tongue in cheek and a bit silly because of those sort of things. Where it's like, that's why Pacific Rim is just to me is like just childish. Whereas Jak-Luke like loves those things, and I can understand why someone would adore it. But for me, I just find them childish. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I'm shitting on it. I'm not this negative. I'm really not. I thought we'd have a really good chat here today. I just feel like I'm shitting on everyone. But no, like I think people who can like really like that sort of stuff. But for me, I just think it's an era thing where I'm like, I don't know. I've just seen it done so poorly where I don't want to entertain it, and that's an ignorance from me, gang. That's an ignorance from me. Okay, so I will take that on the chin and I will move on for it. But I don't get the spectacle here either. Do you? That's my point I'm trying to make for anyone out there. I'm not even here for the spectacle because I find it like, and this is a personal issue. It's not a problem with the film. It is what it is. It's actually probably well done in the film. I think I like the miniature work and everyone coming together. It's cute, fair enough. But I just think it's silly at times because of that issue I've had with watching silly stuff when I was like little. I'm thinking this is dumb. Mate, I think it's just a cultural difference. I think, but it's mighty. It's not Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and then like the Power Rangers remake. Even that, like I think, and it's like the Pacific Rim remake as well. These big monster movies where they tried to use technology with it, and this one with like Mecha Godzilla and stuff. Um, the American market couldn't burst that bubble either. There's an interesting thing there. I'm not necessarily too sure what it is, but culturally, you know, the Western markets really failed to get. I don't know. I suppose that the Godzilla movies make money. I don't get me wrong, but the like mecha versions and stuff like that, they just sort of never took off in America, and I think even now there's a different response to the new King Kong and Godzilla movies. Like, why can't you just make another Godzilla movie? You almost got it with King of the Monsters. You did very well with Godzilla. I think they almost got that film needed. Well, this is my theory about it. I've said it in the podcast. That film needed to be split up in two parts. When he's dying on Antarctica, cut to fucking black, bang, and then put part two. Make a shitload of money. Warner Brothers, you've got that. You could have made a killer. And I think they just got a bit silly with it. And I think at this point in time here, I think people are just bored of this as well. I don't think it's ever been a prosperous arc. I don't think anyone. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it. Are you a kaiju Mechagodzilla fan? Are you one of the? Did you rock up to Power Rangers on day one and demand David Zaslav? Why didn't you make another one? Is that you outside Warner Brothers lot?
Yeah, you know me, a big Power Ranger guy.
That's it. Yeah.
Um, I
Sorry, I
do
didn't.
like that
I didn't
today,
sorry.
as you've shit on every famous filmmaker and person imaginable, the visual of you just surrounded. Today's the day you chose to have on the camera and be surrounded by like 3
Yeah.
glass
No.
posters. No, I think with Godzilla, and this is just kind of like a state of filmmaking thing where it's like, I think inherently it's flawed to try to make like a franchise slash shared universe out of this character. I think in every form where it's been his best work or the best Godzilla films, it's been pretty standalone. It's been pretty, I mean, maybe there's some references to other things.
Mhm.
I just think it's inherently a flawed model for storytelling and portraying this character. So no, I mean, and we talked about this. I mean, again, we've talked about the MonsterVerse. I feel like I was the most negative on the newest MonsterVerse film, just because like the silliness of where it's gone silly wise. It doesn't do a lot for me. But I also find with comedy, I'm very like particular, where if you're gonna go campy like that, I need it to be like absurdist. I need it to be more than just like playing it like, oh, we're still gonna take it seriously and we're
Mhm.
still gonna not really make any choices. It's not that rewarding to me to see like what like Godzilla climbed into the Coliseum or whatever. Like it's just not, for me, that doesn't do a lot for me.
Yeah.
Fair enough though to those who like do really enjoy that. I don't know, it just feels a little bit too safe, a little too dry. And as this classic series went on, I think I wish it would have just gone full campier, which would have just committed to being full silly. I also will say, just like when you talk about the action and stuff, I mean, peace and love. How many times can you see like a miniature city get destroyed and have it be overly thrilling still? This is what,
Mhm.
the 21st century into the franchise. It's not necessarily the most when you repeat that formula, you don't really add a lot to it just because there's a lot of crystals
Yeah.
around. It isn't the most exciting thing. So I definitely get that. I mean, I think we're both pretty milquetoast on this. But I do think these are issues reflected in the modern MonsterVerse. I think they were reflected in each era of Godzilla. I don't think this is anything new, but they continue at least to make money. Like I'm kind of genuinely a little bit surprised the MonsterVerse has like made the box office returns it has. So it seems like they're going to keep pumping these out. So
Yeah, I mean, how many times can you bring Mothra back to save the day? You know, how many times can you have the cities and a small population Japan, you know, disperse watching it? How many times can you have Son of Godzilla fall over its tail? How many times can you have these group of people be enamored with wanting to save Godzilla, but the government above them don't want it to, and they want him either destroyed or to use him like, there becomes narrative issues there as well, where
yeah,
you know you become backed into a corner where you can't do it because if you bring Mothra in, you can't substitute Mothra for anything else because nothing else is as good as looking as that. The issue that they have there as well, again, catch-22, but they can't reiterate it constantly because it's ex machina, isn't it? It's like you just bringing something in a third party to distribute just disturb the narrative and then to get yourself out of jail free card. And at the same token, you can't put Mothra in this more because Mothra doesn't speak and Mothra doesn't particularly emote aside from looking like genuine pretty. I'm
yeah,
not
it's
shitting
just
on it.
no, but it's true. It's a giant molecule. It doesn't do
Yeah,
much.
and I think there's going to be issues slowly but surely with the American stuff because they can't. They've got. I think there's certain issues where you can't have Mothra with something else, and you can't have these other things
Yeah.
fighting each other. And I think, believe it or not, if I'm not mistaken, I think season 2 of Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, whatever it's called, they're actually making their own monsters now, which I think will be interesting to see how that survives. Because I think, like you said, it's at a point now where I don't think there's diehard people who are going to be like, "Oh my god, have you seen what they've done to? Have you seen what they've done to Mothra?" I don't. There's cultural heritage there, but I think with other characters there, I think there's a bit more leeway. Like the big three-headed thing, I can't remember its name. Like that looks amazing on screen, but you can't utilize it all the time.
Yeah.
It's the same issue as a Star Wars. It's like you can't make a film without a lightsaber now because like what's the
Yeah.
point? It's a dirty place otherwise, isn't it? the galaxy far away. I'll be interested to see where Legacy of Monsters takes it. It'd be interesting to see how they can get the missteps from what these felt for, because there's a almost a 30 to almost a 40-year gap now.
Yeah.
And the narrative issues here still stand quite strong. I mean, we'll have a trilogy of King Kong movies next year with Godzilla. And to be fair, as much as I like them as eyesores in a certain way, like you said, it's somewhat surprising that they've made a trilogy out of that. Because after the second one, it was like, I think I can't remember his name either, but the director of it,
Adam Wingard.
I was like, oh, yeah, this will probably be it now. And people were like, and there was like a press release, wasn't there? They have there's nothing on the horizon. It's like, that's odd. That's a strange thing to do. I don't know. I'm glad that I'll probably watch the new one. I like spectacles. I have a soft spot for King Kong and stuff, and Godzilla seeing it on screen. What you can get away with now in CGI, when you compare it to this, there is still like a genuine marvel of watching like Godzilla with the atomic breath. The first Godzilla in 2014, I think, captures that like terrific dirt. It's dark, it's difficult to compare the two because again it's apples and oranges. But when you watch something like this and you think you come away with it and it's like, oh, man, that sunset wasn't it good, Carson? Like, and there's nothing else. Good. Yeah, it was really well done. And the Nancy Sinatra "You Only Live Twice" melody, like I don't know how that is getting through with copyright. And then you have like, did you get the American Japanese song at the end?
I believe so. I watched the subtitled version, to be clear, so I got Japanese dialogue.
Sorry, but we all know you don't have to sort of like put me out there for not being a fan.
I was just saying I'm a real fan.
Okay, I hate Godzilla. Okay, there you go. I don't like this right now. I'm joking. Yeah, I just think just to put it to a bed here about my opinion on it. I just think it's just to reiterate what I've said throughout. I just think it's just come to a natural reset. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it gets burnt out. It's tired. I think the formula is slowly broken away and very diluted. The characters here are not interesting anymore. They're new every other year. There's no lineage. There's no arc through there. So ultimately, you're there for the experience. I don't necessarily think that the experience in itself is atmospheric or the world building is anywhere influential or immersive. I don't think this film knows what atmosphere is. It has very small moments. I think it's very much just very mundane, very bottom of the barrel. But it's not. It's inoffensive, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's to reiterate. But God knows where I would put this on a scale of all of them. I don't think if I could rank these films.
Well, good thing next month on our Patreon we're gonna go through just like we did Nolan. We're gonna go through all of 30 or whatever. So get ready.
Oh my god! No, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do that. And we've done a lot of stuff on here where I'm like, I've been a perpetrator of these horrible nights where it's like, please stop going on about Roman Polanski or please stop going on about other people. And I'm like, yeah, we should probably have stopped right then and there. But that is where you grow older and you realize,
sure,
the Godzilla ranked episode will be lost in time. But do you know what would be interesting to go back onto the Godzilla Japanese? It's nice that they've got someone now in charge of it. Not necessarily in charge, but they've got a custodian who is in love with it. When they went to the Academy Awards and they wore the boots and stuff like that. I know that's like a little small detail, but I love that, and like it's so infectious, the passion. And the director like adores that, and it's creating its own mythology, but while still remaining true to the source material. And the character designs are outstanding. And even the Godzilla before that, the Japanese one, which again I cannot remember what it's called.
Shin Godzilla.
That's it, Shin Godzilla. That's an interesting one about contemporary, what we mentioned before as well, that it works with the Fukushima devastation there as well. Like there's a cultural meaning to that, a pull. So but there's lovely designs there, fascinating designs and iconography. And where this goes next, I'll be fascinated. But as much as I like those two films, the director has got a way with working with actors and blossoming this relationship the young couple in it. You know, when she gets like taken away and she's gone. It's like that. I was going to mention a Man of Steel thing there, but I feel like I'm just pandering too much to the Zack Snyder fans here, so I need to just
Oh my
rail
goodness.
myself in. I've got a Wonder Woman 1984. Carson's got the flag behind me. I've got the Wonder Woman 1984 in front of me, so we've got like a great beaming of light both ways. But I think it's like, there's an affection there and a really vulnerability with these characters, and there's so much passion in there and so much love and affection, and sometimes
Yep.
you've got to go to the laws of this in a way that it's not an offense of any kind,
Yeah.
but there's a cultural reset, isn't there? There has to be a point where it's like, we need to just stop now. Let's just give it a few years and let's just go again with someone who's a richness. And I think I can't remember who the director was. Dan Trachtenberg, I think his name is, with the
Yes.
Predator franchise. It's a great
That's
way
a great
that,
call.
yeah, it's something just goes a little bit too far, or there's a when Alien vs Predator Requiem. Sorry, I just gaped them with that, so I have to bring that up. I mean, I've only ever seen 13% of that film because you can't see anything in it. You've got to put the brightness on 155, and the TV blows up after you view it. So it's one and done, guys. One and done. There's a point where a franchise becomes quite tiresome, but it's so vulnerable of having loads of ideas, and the people who are the custodians have no idea what to do with it, and then you get a terrible one in 2018. We'll leave that for its day. There's some choices in that, both behind and in front of the camera, and third act that is like, we'll get on. That'll be another day anyway. We'll move on. But there's an interesting where then someone pitches an idea, an identity for a franchise, and like, I want to do this with it. I want to take a risk. I want to take it back to its vulnerability. Look at character like Prey. Let's not have any expectation. Let's have some fun with it, and it just blossoms to Killers of whatever the other one was. And is it Badlands or another one? We've seen them both. It's blossoming now. And Ridley Scott did the same thing with Prometheus, where you've got to allow some. And these are both monster movies as well. In the same case, one's a bit more spectacle than the other, but there's both very similar types of. Let's just keep this here, and we'll just give it another identity. And Fede did a really good job with it, and Romulus with a few hits and misses here, but I think -1 is going to be very similar. And you've just got to wait for the right time for the right custodian who has affection for the franchise, and maybe it's a generational gap of someone who's brought up with these thinking, that was a bit dull, wasn't it? Maybe we could have done this. And I think that it's like the Indiana Jones effect, where you watch the serials of the 1950s and 60s, and it's like in the 80s, like, I can bring this to life, And I think and then Spielberg doing that and so forth. I don't know why I've made that reach, but I've got there. But I just think that it just takes some time. So maybe that it had to go this way in 94, so that in 2020, 2021 and 2022, someone could really blossom with it, and it ebbs and flows, doesn't it? So take it as a win almost, that sometimes, as Alfred Pennyworth said, sometimes, when you fall, I don't know what he said, but when you fall, you've got to get back up or something.
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the interesting parts about like the MonsterVerse side of things, though, is like there is no curator. There's no I guess it technically was Adam Wingard. I don't think he, Peace and Love, had a lot of passion for it, and now he's out. He's not the director of the new one, so it's very curious to me. It's like, it's even like the MCU or DC universe. Well, I think we both have pros and cons, let's say, with those franchises. Like, they've always had someone at the center with that vision, with that passion, making those choices. Star Wars the same. It's very curious that franchise is operating with just like seemingly no one in that role. But alas, I mean, I guess that's kind of where you get where we are with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that because of the decisions they've made, because of that they'll never be able to go back to 2014's Godzilla either.
Yeah,
they'll never be able to do that because of someone making Mechagodzilla somewhere, and I don't know. I think there's leaps, isn't there? And then, but once you jump the shark.
After a big break, though, I mean, Casino Royale, right? 2005, it happened, right? They took some leaps, and then they came back. So eventually, maybe.
It's actually 2006, Carson.
Oh,
now,
sorry.
Your cinephile card is now reversed.
Sorry, dumb American. No,
I'm just joking.
I don't know about that British shit.
And there's us speaking about Japanese heritage as well. But maybe it makes I need to calm down with that. But no, I agree with you. I think custodians and showrunners get a bad rep, don't they? Noah Hawley on the Alien Earth
Yep.
needs to be taken outside and dealt with. Like that to me is like, oh, I don't want to go there really. But I think showrunners and custodians, it's very hit and miss. So when someone takes the mantle, it ultimately rests on their shoulders. And I think, like you said, there's a lot of another one is probably like the Terminator franchise, where someone's been in it and left it, and you can tell who was keeping that together. Like if anyone went into an Avatar franchise now, bar Cameron, I don't think it would hold its own weight, because I think there's just that someone's working with a certain type of source and understands the rhymes and rhythms, and then sometimes you let it go and come back to it. But I think custodians and showrunners, sometimes there's a big risk now with the Amazon thing with James Bond that I'm scared to death of, and you can tell what's going to happen with it. You can get Villeneuve on. It's a throwback there. They're loving that reference right now. They're all laughing if they've made it this far. But there's like they get Stephen Wright on board. They get Denis Villeneuve in it, and there's like, oh, there's a hook there, isn't there? But then behind that is someone running it who doesn't give a shit about it, who hasn't in the family for 60 years, who's a conglomerate. And I think it loses that sense of passion where they dangle the carrot and it gets lost. I think with when it's with Toho, it's still at home, and you're able to take risks, but it's still it's from the house that built it. It's still from home. And I think with American stuff, it'll never feel like it's the real thing, because it's somewhat been repackaged. And I don't mind that, but at the end of the day, it's never going to feel like it's got, like you said, a custodian onto it. It's not got a big showrunner, and James Gunn might do a really good job with the Superman stuff for the MCU or the DC, whatever that shit is. But at the end of the day, I think you're gonna you're gonna upset someone and make someone else's day. You're gonna be the villain in someone's world there, and as of how fragile people are now as film fans, as I've demonstrated in this podcast, I think fragility is something that's on the rise. So maybe it's a good thing that person, because after a few entries there, it's like, ooh, these people would want him to be quartered and hanged. If people had their way now. So
Sure.
So we'll see what happens, but it'd be nice them to get back to boots on the ground in the American stuff. But I'm glad that the Japanese Godzilla franchise is still taking its time, and also on a literal sense, it's generating momentum, and it's taking its time, it's developing, it's not feeling rushed. It's always a good sign, the anticipation will it'll be crucifying, but the wait should be, from what -1 was like, this should be it should be something really to look forward to. So
no, I'm really excited. I mean, we'll be here talking about it probably, so we stay tuned. I think that's going to wrap up our conversation on Godzilla versus SpaceGodzilla. Sad we weren't more positive. Again, maybe programmed this expecting us to be, but I think we had a nice conversation kind of digesting Godzilla entirely there. Let's go to our question of the week quickly, asking what is our favorite non-Godzilla character or monster. I have to give a shout out. My character, the only one like not brought back ever again, Ebra, Horror of the Deep. This giant lobster thing. It's a very fun film. I think it's one that commits more to what I was saying when I was referring to Bond and some of the campiness. I think it has a good style, and it's just like, I don't know, it's a big lobster. It's an aquatic battle. You don't always get that with the Godzilla. Sadly, they chose not to bring this back in King of Monsters, and so we'll never get it back, because this is not a character where, like with Mecha Godzilla, at the end of a film, it's going to be a big twist that like this lobster comes out of an iceberg. But I certainly am a stan of Ebra, so I would love to see more of Ebra. I will say the Godzilla Museum in Japan, I've heard unconfirmed reports that the original suit is there on display. So I do need to get to Japan to possibly see that, but we will see. Jack, what is your favorite non-Godzilla monster? Is it the three-headed dragon?
It is. It literally is King Ghidorah.
King Ghidorah, yeah.
But I like yours. I'll do a throwback, and this is only one because I quite like the film of it. But I would say Biolant. Is it I don't Biolant or
Something
Biolante?
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've revoked my cinephile card. I've been dire tonight, Carson. I do apologise. I hope I've entertained somebody because it's been terrible on my end. I would say that again, like you would about Abora. It's just different, unique, takes a bit of a risk.
Yeah.
You know, the if I'm not mistaken, I think there was hints of these in King of Monsters, weren't there? And then
Yep.
I just hope that Monarch does something with this. And if Monarch can do anything, it'd be great to show the not this. This is not. I don't want it to be like this to be a negative, but it'd be great if you could have like a B team existence where you've
Absolutely.
got the big icons, but there's still loads of like because the I've seen trailers for it and like King Kong's in it and stuff. Oh, sorry, it's not King Kong because that's Universal. It's Kong. It's like when we get Son of Kong, I'll be there day one. Don't worry about that. I will be there.
We have the Kid Kong. Come on. Are you
Well,
more of a Kid Godzilla or a Kid Kong person?
I'm neither.
Okay.
Yeah, I rejected Baby Kong. Sorry, again. Maybe that was another conversation for another time. But I think, but there will be moments in Monarch to be able to give flavor of the week to these characters, and I hope they do that. I hope they go back to Toho and be like, how do you feel about Biolante or Bora? How do you feel like if we can put a few others in here and so forth and that? And maybe that'll be the stage to give these characters that are now 20, 30 year old, give them a bit of a fresher lick of paint as well. I'm hoping that's what it is. That would be one of my ones because I quite like the environmental thing about that. I think that's quite like a neat little thing that they did and something a bit different and not just like another monster that's made out of metal and stuff. I like that. But Abora is a great shout, really good.
I would say those are my top two that we mentioned. So yeah, I mean, for
Yeah.
sure. I'm curious. I mean, maybe I'll try Monarch at some point. I really don't even know what the show like is, but valid. I heard it's great. So maybe next time we talk, we will mention it. With that, let's go to our rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't talked about on the podcast. I will go quickly. I watched Hitchcock's Suspicion for the first time.
Ooh.
It was fine. Good performances. I really like the setup here of this woman who marries this guy who was hiding that he was poor, and she starts to think that he's going to murder her. Drags its feet a little bit, kind of how Hitchcock does, I think, in this era. But overall, good. I finally saw Best in Show. Very fun comedy. A-list, obviously, comedic cast. Wish it was just longer at 90 minutes. Like, you really don't get enough time, I feel like, with these characters. I would like to see a 2-hour version of this. Rewatch Scary Movie, getting ready for the new one. Fun. That first it's very clever. Yes, definitely aged poorly in some regards, but clearly just like loves the horror genre and loves those films. I watched The Queen for the first time. I confused this with another film, so I really was not prepared for what this movie is. I can't say that this is like an accurate representation of the Queen during the death of Princess Diana. Maybe it is simping for her a little bit too much at times if you want to go on a historical context. But I thought it was a really fascinating look at when you put someone on a pedestal and when they have this personal relationship. Like, how much of that does the audience or does the like general public, does it actually matter to the general public when the general public is like, she's not grieving enough? Like, how dare you look at this woman who had this personal relationship, whatever you think of that relationship, and have a take on her grieving? Again, can't say historically maybe it all adds up, but certainly just in a vacuum for what it's presenting with power dynamics, I thought it was like weirdly poignant with social media. So I really enjoyed that. 2 new reviews, 2 new releases. The Bride I watched. Fascinated if you watched this one. It was pretty horrific, I have to say. I was really hoping that this was going to be good. And it opens, very minor spoilers, it opens with the ghost of Mary Shelley like yelling and ranting about feminism and then possessing a girl's body. But I don't really know if Mary Shelley like exists in this world because Frankenstein exists with Dr. Frankenstein. I don't know. It's very confusing, but I just think it's a mess. It's not well done. And then finally, I have to give a huge recommendation. Jan Komasa's Heel. This is the guy who made Corpus Christi, a pretty strong director overall. I think this is kind of his magnum opus, randomly dumped on VOD, about a family led by Stephen Graham who takes this troubled teenager and kidnaps him and puts him in the basement, like collared and chained, and is like trying to teach him how to be a good person. A lot here about reform, a lot here about family. It has such a good script where like this is a movie, and I can see so many modern people on film Twitter like not getting it because it doesn't tell you anything. It just gives you these little subtle hints at like the history of this family, the history of this boy, certain different things with their power dynamics and certain different things with their motivations. And it just doesn't tell you though. It gives you enough to where like immediately you want to rewatch it. Immediately you want to discuss interpretations with friends. But like very, very effective. I literally gave it 5 stars. I think it was fantastic. So that's what I've been watching. Jack, what have you seen recently?
Mine's a bit sort of a dour. If anyone's not they're not aware, I've been sort of away from watching a lot of stuff because I've had some stuff going on at home. But I've been working away as well, so it's been pretty shit for getting anything like to watch that's either recent or that's not on my iPad. And I've been sort of doing Black History Month, and now I'm on Women in Film in March, so they'll be coming up. But for a few of the things I've watched a while ago, I had like this McDonough marathon. I watched the Guard with Brendan Gleeson and Don Cheadle. That's one of my favorite films. So politically incorrect, but like sums up like Irishness and people coming into that world and the not moving an inch to allow a cultural immersion. It's like always a divide. Outstanding. If anyone wants like a really strange comedy for an hour and 30 minutes about some drug dealers in Southern Ireland or Ireland, is probably best said. Definitely watch that. Calvary, again, Brendan Gleeson, outstanding piece of like emotive filmmaking. Very dreary, very dark, devastating to watch. Fabulous performance by Brendan Gleeson. That came out now. He'd win an Academy Award for it, no doubt. I did watch In Bruges as well, which is probably going to be Mike McDonough's film, bar Banshees of Inisherin, but undoubtedly that is the film. 2 more, another an Irish thing. I watched Saipan. I'm going to review this for the site. I wanted to watch this for years. It's a very British, or should I say Irish football thing, where in 2002 Ireland went to the World Cup, and a player called Roy Keane had a big fallout with the manager. And it sounds like nothing. I love explaining this to Carson. It's like what, like it means nothing to for the wider world, but like it was so explosive at the time. Like he got kicked out of the tournament, and it was like this massive thing for years and years and years. And they made a film with it. Steve Coogan plays Mick McCarthy, who's the manager. And then another kid who plays Roy Keane, I can never remember his name. He's a great Irish actor, fabulous performance, very venomous, very tense, really great character study. I don't want to say too much because it's going to be a review for Clapper because it was just so fabulous. I'll end on a bit more of a downer here. I didn't even know if I wanted to talk about this, but I feel like I might as well because I did watch Louis Theroux's Manosphere documentary on Netflix. Now, I've been aware of these people because unfortunately I'm the sort of demographic they're aiming towards. So it's everywhere. I also work in an industry where this is everywhere. Now, I know people who teach kids, like, 7 to 8 to 9-year-olds and then to 14-year-olds, my cousin, namely. These people are constantly spoken about by kids, about then the perception about what's a woman's place. This is a disease that's quite frightening. And then when you watch the documentary, I find that Louis Theroux on other people is great because he's a very slow but assured narrator who goes in and slowly uncovers and showcases that his subject, like their insecurities about that or the strangeness about that. This is a lot more serious than that because these it's not like going to interview Jimmy Savile, who at the time nobody knew anything about to some extent, or Chris Eubank, or to investigate other things and Scientology, which I think is probably another weak entry. This feels like it's like you're gonna have to fight fire with fire, and it doesn't really help that you're gonna go into a room with somebody who does not give a shit about anything but themselves and money, who will make anti-Semitic comments, homophobic comments, misogynist comments, racial comments, who's not interested whatsoever. And you have a British guy who's like very aloof to some extent and is quite, funny and is just there. That to me is a difficult combination because multiple times here, Louis Theroux makes these people look like absolute tits, prominently by their own words. And yet on other occasions, it's like, are we not going to just realize what's happened there? And I think as a documentarian, it must be difficult because you can't really interject. You've just got to watch this thing go. You're documenting the subject. But there's multiple times where I'm like, you're allowing this sickness to not be cut off. The rot setting in, and you're not doing anything about it. And by presenting it, like there's one with like a kid called Sneeko. People can go out and view this. I get and someone else who's just despicable from certain things that they've said, far right, and so they would denounce all this, but it's very much adamant. And then like he's walking the street in New York, and like loads of kids walk up to him, and he's like 15, 16, 17, and like they're enamored with him, and he's like just plays it off like he's a celebrity, all because he sits behind a computer and says the most rancid things, and then expects not to get held accountable for those things because he's then subjected to issues about the Matrix and stuff. Long story short, I found the documentary to be quite difficult to watch because I find that he deals with about 4 or 5 of these people, and none of them seem to get any sort of come up, or at least aside from maybe one, which is HR's Tiki Toki, where he meets him 1-to-1 and they have a bit of a set to. Everyone else seems to just demonstrate what they want to do, gets away with it, and then feels defensive about it. It just feels like a nothing burger. It just feels empty and nothing to me. We're doing a documentary about subjects which are vile and horrid, and yet at the same token, I'm like, but we're just presenting these horrible things. Maybe I've got my brain's wired a different way, but I find it to be a really torturous experience. I don't know if you've seen this. If you're aware of who these people are, I would avoid this. And I know that sounds like somewhat strange, but I just think that, I hate to say this, but this is just going to fuel the fire even more. This does nothing to denounce them. It actually heightens the fame because it's often like utilized as funny, or these people showcase what they're like and demonstrate it. And I think Louis Theroux doesn't push back on enough. It was a really difficult watch. I've never felt I'll be fascinated to know your opinion. I felt helpless watching this as someone who's just hit 30, who I have had friends who talk about this, and it's like, I'm a superior man and stuff like that, and you hear a certain phrase, and it's like, sometimes I'll tell my wife, and it's like, oh, it's quite horrifying. I don't know how, because I'm in a different industry outside of this. This is what I do for fun, and I think it's not breaching that now. It's becoming into like, I don't want to get on a fucking get on my soapbox and like, people know how bad the world is at times, so I don't want to be here and be like, oh, listen to Jack on his soapbox. It's nothing like that. I don't want to get into that because I feel like people are here for something fun, and I don't ever want to. I don't want to bring that down. Sure. I felt pretty helpless watching this. I felt like I was watching something happening in real time, and just was undefensive about it. I just couldn't do anything about it. It's. I'm not like I'm white knighting myself. Like, please, like, save me. I'm not trying to say like, oh, feel sorry for me like that. But it's fucking devastating to watch this, and maybe that's more power of the documentary. I don't know. I'm still in two thoughts of it. I'd love you to watch it. But it's so depressing, and it's just like a sign of the times where, I don't know, I just think it makes me feel sick, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I don't know. As someone who works with teenage boys, like, every day, it's not exactly, I don't know, I think I got it. But It's not fun. I would say just in the world, I felt that hopeless, like that, not hopelessness, but well, some hopelessness, but like just, I don't know, I think you've really had to reckon, depending on your belief system in the world recently, with like feeling a lack of like power and a lack of like, I guess, faith in like humanity to just be better.
Yeah. It feels
Like,
like a totally wrong time, doesn't it, to watch something like this when certain things have happened for the last 2 or 3 years.
well, I feel that way though about so many documentaries. Like, not to get into a whole other conversation, but I feel like so many of these socially like relevant and conscious documentaries that are covering such important and vile topics, no matter what topic you want to point to, is insane how many of them do not carry like the substance or articulation of like really condemning its topics and really getting to like the point of why things are bad. For example, there's a documentary coming out soon about AI, and apparently in it is just like, yeah, it's bad, but it doesn't actually talk about like the specifics of why it's bad, which then allows people to be like, well, it's similar to like how people view, I don't know, climate change, where it's like, well, hypothetically it's bad, maybe like it might be happening, but there's nothing specific. But like in AI, you can see very blatantly like issues with energy, issues on communities of color. Like there's a million issues that are very practical, real, that you can analyze and see. And to have a documentary explore AI, but not actually like bring those points up and keep that negative as kind of theoretical. And that's just one example of it. It's just, I don't know. I think we're getting to a point where in media, when everything is so polarized and politicalized and you have such harshness and vileness in so many spaces, you do need to be very, in my opinion, like direct and specific and poignant and back up what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad to hear that it just kind of like showcased that without maybe taking that next step of initiative. But I'd be curious to watch. I've not seen a ton of Louis Theroux's stuff, but I've heard great things. So
Yeah, I mean, it's like, not to keep on going on about it, but it feels like, the way to describe it is that it's very passive, and
sure.
it's not. I don't think Louis Theroux is there to, because I don't want to get him on the list as well. But I feel like I don't think it's like incendiary to say that I'm not trying to suggest that by what he's doing is that he's allowing these people to blossom.
Sure.
I just think that because he's not actively doing that, I don't think he's like purposely doing that. But I do get the strong impression that because he's so passive to a certain extent, because of his viewing quality, of how he does his, how he gets into his subject. And there is an occasion where he interviews a guy called Myron, right? And this is just, it's called Fresh and Fit, and they get like girls out of the Miami harbors and stuff like that, and the clubs, and they bring them in and they interview them, and they just ask them silly questions when these girls are either drunk, or are not, have no real interest in like geography or history. People have their own lives, you know. I don't.
Sure.
If people couldn't name 6 countries, I don't give a shit. As long as they're happy and they feed the kids and they're fine and living their own life, who's to say any different? But it's just appalling. And he interviews. I don't want to keep on going over this. I'll keep this brief. But he interviews him, and his girlfriend's there, and he talks about like, oh, would you be? You've said you want to get married a few times. How does your girlfriend feel about it? She's like, well, I'm not too sure. And then he goes, well, actually, I haven't really made my mind up yet. And it's the only time in the interview where like he gets him, and they actually break up at the end of the documentary.
Wow.
And it's like you can tell that he caught the rot there, and he mentioned it, and he made him. You're going to either defend this or not, or make you look like an idiot. Throughout the other times, it's just like they either make themselves, they say ludicrous stuff, and everyone on X or Twitter's like, "Oh my god, have you heard what they've said? That's ridiculous."
Yeah.
One-way monogamy, and it's like, yeah, we all know that. Not one-way monogamy is the worst thing in the world if that's what you want to do, but it's how they say it about.
Sure.
Well, I want other women, and my wife needs to stay with the children. It's like, well, are they wanting that as well? Because that sounds like it's very much a pushed position upon them. It's like that's the conversation we need to be having. But because these people say ludicrous things, I think everyone hinders to that, like that ludicrous thing, like, oh my god, outrage! Oh my god, outrage! And yeah, that is outrage. But you have to look at the stuff behind that and realize that's actually terrible. Why he's doing it, you know?
Absolutely.
So that's my opinion on that. I know it's going
Yes.
on, but
No, it's good to talk about.
It will ruin your day. It will ruin your evening. It will ruin your week. It's and these people are just blowing up on online because of it. And it's worrying, isn't it? Like having
Yes.
a young girl as a kid.
Oh, it must be horrifying.
Jesus.
Yes. Well, on that fun note, that's going to do it for us today on the
Yeah.
podcast. Jack, where can we find your work online?
You can find me on X, on Letterboxd, with that username Jak-Luke Sharp, and you can find me on Clapper, where I'm going to drop my review of Saipan hopefully this week. I'm looking forward to getting back in the rhythm of writing again. I've done a lot of writing for a while. Life has just taken over, and
Sure.
it's a nice, not a nice one, but it's sometimes that you either slow down or something slows you down, and it's nice, very much like SpaceGodzilla, Godzilla, where sometimes there needs to be a bit of a calm, and then you go back again. So I'm looking forward to getting back into it. It's always a nice for you to invite me on these things as well, and watch some crazy stuff. If it's the masterpiece at Zegfeld or it's the masterpiece at SpaceGodzilla, it's always a pleasure talking about film. And I know I don't want to put it on a downer ending like we usually do, but you've got to take the good with the bad with cinema. And there's good stuff,
Yes.
and then there's interesting stuff as well. So I'm glad that you open up these conversations, Carson. But it's always nice to see you again. Thank you very much for having me on.
No, thank you for joining. And yes, you mentioned it recently. We just put out our Great Zegfield Best Picture Rewind episode. If you want more of us talking about just excellent cinema that we have no issues with, you can go check that out. Myself and Nicola Grasso recently reviewed some Godard, which is fantastic. Myself and Michael Fairbanks just reviewed Pixar's Hoppers. So a lot of good stuff. Also coming out next week on our Patreon. Our bonus episode for the month is on The House That Jack Built, which is really exciting. And then we will be talking about, for our Best Picture Rewind next month, Casablanca. That's going to be a super fun episode, a full house for it. So it should be a great conversation. So with that, thank you everyone for listening and watching, supporting us here on the podcast. We will see you next time. Goodbye.